Hey everyone, you join me here in Magdeburg, Germany, which is about 2 hours outside of Berlin. This past week, my manager Jorge and I flew out from London Heathrow to Frankfurt, Germany for what is my first test of the season in the new Dallara F3 with Motopark. It actually sounds really weird saying that here in what is almost July at this point. So we're going to be on the road for the next month or so for the first 3 races of my season in FIA International F3. So if you didn't know, I'm actually doing both championships, Euro Formula Open and FIA F3, so it's going to be a very busy year. So anyway, I thought I'd make this video to kind of bring you guys up to speed on what I've been up to so far. After all, this is the first time I've traveled since the pandemic began, so there were definitely some interesting things that we learned along the way. Travel is definitely not as convenient as it used to be. So the race season is about to finally start. To get things going in Euro Formula, I had a 2-day test in Hockenheim, which was really just for me to get familiar with the car. Most of my teammates were able to travel to Germany during the pandemic at some point, and they were able to get on track. But in my case, I was in the UK, so I really needed to stay put because the situation was quite bad there. But now I've finally been able to get to Germany. It's really good to see all the guys again, and I think it didn't really take that long to get a rhythm. Obviously, getting used to the social distancing measures in the context of a racing paddock is a little bit weird, but it wasn't too difficult to get used to. In terms of actually traveling through Europe via plane, it was actually pretty straightforward, but it was definitely less convenient than it normally would be. At the time we were flying, Heathrow was pretty much entirely closed in terms of storefronts. There was one pharmacy that was open and there was one food vendor that was open. And because it was the only food vendor, the line was actually pretty long. The social distancing measures in the airport were all pretty strong and people kind of kept to them fairly aggressively, but as soon as we got to the gate, it was just like being packed in like sardines. We flew with Lufthansa, and as soon as we got on the plane, we realized that the flight was fully booked. So there were people in middle seats, and it definitely felt a little bit awkward for me at first because I'd really been spending the last 3 months in the UK in pretty strict lockdown, and I was purposely, trying to keep myself safe so that I was ready to go racing when that all started back up. So it was actually weird being close to so many people, and it was a bit uncomfortable at first, to be honest. Obviously, we all had to wear masks, but some people had pretty weak face coverings, I'd say. On the bright side, I'd say the airplane was probably the cleanest I've ever seen an airplane. The floors were absolutely spotless, so they must be doing some pretty deep cleaning of these planes after each flight. Luckily, we had loads of documentation to describe why we were going into Germany, and it was a really good thing we had that because the border agents certainly weren't happy with the idea of letting anyone into the country that wasn't German, but luckily we were able to get through. Once we actually got into Germany, there were only a limited number of restaurants that were open, usually fast foody type places, and there was really only outdoor seating. I would say that the social distancing measures in Germany are definitely more relaxed in general compared to the UK, but just as I was leaving the UK, they were announcing the relaxing of the rules there, so I think Germany's just maybe a few weeks ahead of the UK in that regard. I should also mention that being in hotels is also a bit different than it would have been in the past. For starters, some hotels don't have restaurants open, or they have a very limited option in terms of what you can order. When it comes to ordering breakfast, we normally need to order specifically what we want and what time we're going to be there because they need to make sure that there aren't too many people coming at the same time. And then when we're at restaurants, we always have to fill out a piece of paper here in Germany that says our home address, our name, our phone number, just in case someone at that table or in that restaurant gets COVID, then they can track down all the other people who are in that restaurant. So definitely there are some minor inconveniences at the moment when you're traveling through Europe, but I think a lot of this is going to get lifted in the next couple of weeks in Europe, so I'll definitely give updates as to how things are changing as it happens. So when we actually landed in Frankfurt, we picked up our rental car and we immediately hit the Autobahn. It was a little over an hour drive, but we went straight to the track in Hockenheim. It took a little over an hour to get to Hockenheim, but as soon as we got there, I did a seat fitment and pedal check because I made the seat actually over 4 months ago at this point, and I was never able to really truly break it in. It turned out not to be perfect, so I ended up remaking the seat after the 2 days, but it was good enough that I could deal with it. If you guys actually want to know how we make a seat in a Formula 3 car, go ahead and check the link down in the description. I actually made a video about it a few months ago. So in Hockenheim, we had a 2-day test where I got to drive the new Dallara F3 with Motopark for the first time. It was a super hot couple of days. I was absolutely drenched in sweat the whole time, but the car was really, really nice to drive. My specific car had just been built and obviously hadn't been driven yet, so there were a few issues on the first day which needed to be resolved, but that's to be expected. It was basically a shakedown test for both myself and the car. So this new car had a lot of corner and grip. So if you didn't already know, the Dallara F320 is a completely new car from the last year's Dallara F319. This car has more downforce, less drag, and the same weight. So it's pretty much a lap time game all the way around the track. Because of the halo in the new car, the center of gravity is a little bit higher, and you definitely notice that in transitional corners. Feels a tiny bit lazy, but the extra downforce makes up for that in high-speed corners. Definitely this whole traveling for racing is very different for us. Normally you would use it as a maybe social opportunity, mingling with other teams, even other drivers, or even sometimes we like to just explore the cities that we're traveling to. But for the most part now, we're having to be really cautious because getting a positive test for COVID means I just literally can't race, or probably can't even travel back to the UK or to the US. So we have to be really careful. I'm having to just basically stick in my hotel room for as much as possible, and then we really only go out to eat or maybe get laundry done or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely taking some getting used to, but this is kind of the reality of what racing life is like right now. But hopefully it all goes back to normal soon. Anyway guys, this has been the first official restart of getting back into things. I'll be here in Magdeburg for a couple more days. I need to take the coronavirus test before we actually drive to Austria for the first 2 races of International F3 in RedBull Ring. So definitely stay tuned for that. Not exactly looking forward to this COVID test. I've heard some pretty awful things about it, but it's something we're going to have to do, and probably something I'm going to have to get used to through the rest of this year. At the moment, the weather is looking like rain and thunderstorms all week there, so it's definitely going to make things interesting for my first race at International F3. Should be interesting to say the least. Alright guys, with all that being said, see you guys on the next one.